Hey, John here. Have you ever nailed a guitar lick in practice, but whenever you try to weave it into a song or a solo, it just crumbles to pieces? Well, you're not alone. This is a very common problem for a lot of guitar players. What if I told you there's a way to bulletproof your technique so that every lick you learn will actually be usable? Today, I'm going to share a tried and true method that I've been teaching for years. This strategy will help you improve your technique and make it bulletproof. So grab your guitar and let's get going. To demonstrate this method, I'm going to show you 3 phrases that focuses on different techniques. This is important so you know how to apply it to your own practice. To start it off, we have a legato phrase. After that, we'll go to a sweep arpeggio. And finally, we're going to apply it to some alternate picking. I call this method a loop method, and I sort of stumbled upon this myself in the late 90s. I even wrote a column for the old Shops from Hell guitar site about this. I don't think I even called it the loop method then, but throughout the years of teaching, I just needed a name for it. I'm not saying that I came up with it or anything like that, it's just that I've stumbled upon it myself and I found it really useful. So I'm sure you're asking yourself now, what is this method and why is it so effective? I'm going to start off by telling you why it's so effective, and then I'm going to show you exactly how to do it.
Do it.
Practicing something from only one starting note leaves a lot of potential on the table. It makes your playing fragile because you're depending on perfect circumstances to play it. However, starting on each note of a loop pattern will ensure that you're ready to play it in any context. And as you'll see, it also deepens your understanding of the phrase and helps your timing. All good things for your musicality and your technique. In other words, you're making that phrase bulletproof. So next up, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it.
Okay.
Basically, the whole thing boils down to 3 different steps. Step 1, find a loopable pattern. And if something is not loopable, you can always make it loopable by adding a note or 2. Step 2, you number the notes, and that's very important because otherwise it's really easy to lose track of where you are in the sequence and how many variations you have and all that kind of stuff, and I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by that. Then step 3 is simply starting on each of these numbered notes, and however many notes you have in a pattern, you're going to have as many variations on that particular lick. So let's get going here. All right, so step 1, find the loopable pattern. I'm just gonna show this on this pentatonic thing first. So we're in the A minor pentatonic, starting on the 7th fret of the G string, going 7, 5, 7, 5. So we just repeat that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I did now was step number 2, number the notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm not numbering the notes of the pattern, I'm numbering the notes of the sequence. And what I mean by that is that I'm not necessarily interested in that D is the first note, C is the second note, for example, because depending on the sequence you're playing, you might repeat some of these notes. So what you want to keep in mind is the numbering of the sequence, and we'll get to that later as well. But this one is very straightforward because you have 4 notes in the sequence and they're all 4 different notes. So now what's interesting here, if I start on the 2nd note, you're going to hear that it sounds different, even though it's the same notes in the same order. And before you go like, well, hang on, if you start this with a downstroke, you're turning the picking around. Yes, but I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm just going to start with an upstroke. It's still going to feel different. So I want you to try this yourself now. Just take these notes, 7, 5, 7, 5 on the G and D string. Play it normally first, so starting with a downstroke, and just go. Then you start on the 2nd note of the sequence with an upstroke and go. As you can hear, that sounds different. And then the 3rd note will be a downstroke, and then the 4th note an upstroke. So if I go through them again, just listen to the difference in sound. So that's basically the spotlight effect that we talked about in the accents video. It's the same effect, but now we're kind of forcing the spotlight effect, because when we start on a note like this, you basically putting that note on the downbeat. So if you go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and we start on the downbeat here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So even without you accenting anything, you're going to find that the sound still changes because your ear is going to be drawn to whatever note is perceived to be on the downbeat. So loops like these are very straightforward because you have one note per starting point of the pattern. So a common mistake when doing this for the first few times is confusing the number of the notes with the order of the sequence. Let me show you what I mean. So we start here on the 5th fret of the high E string, and we're going to play 1, 2 on the 6th fret, and then 4 on the 8th fret, and then we're going to go back to 2. So it's a 4-note sequence like this. 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, right? So now we have 3 notes, but the actual sequence has 4 notes. So what a lot of my students tend to do when they try this for the first time is they play the first variations. You have 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, 2, 4, 2, 1. Very clear and logical. Start on the 2nd note. 2, 4, 2, 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, 2. Great. Then the 4th finger. 4, 2, 1, 2, 4, 2, 1, 2, 4. And then like, great, I'm done. But that's only 3 variations, and we have 4 notes in the actual loop, right? So the problem here is that the 2nd note, the 2nd finger, is actually played in 2 different ways when you do the loop. So you have it as the 2nd note, but it's also 3, 4, the 4th note. So you basically have these variations from the 2nd note. You have 2, 4, 2, 1, 2, and then you also have 2, 1, 2, 4, 2. So hopefully you can see that it can become a bit complicated to keep track of everything, especially when you play different sequences that are not as straightforward. This is easily avoidable though. You simply just need to number the notes of the sequence, and then you start on each number in the sequence and end on that number. And then when you get back to 1, you're gonna know that you're done. So basically think of it like this. I'm just gonna go back to this one again. So in this one, if we disregard the fingering here and all that stuff, just the actual numbers in the sequence, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So basically, that's the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And a side note here, I always stop and end on the same note as I started on. That also makes it way easier to not confuse yourself. So 1 going to 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And then you start on the 2nd note and go 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And then you go start on the 3rd note and go 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And you start on the 4th note and go 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you're back on 1 again. Eventually we'll get the hang of this. You don't need to number the notes and all that stuff, but it's always good to do this initially. And whenever I'm practicing something, I make sure to do that for the first run through so I don't miss any variation, because it can get confusing when the sequences get a bit more complicated. But that's also a good thing, because if you can get through this with pretty much any sequence, you'll find that you really know that sequence. All right, so it's time to go through the examples so you can really see how this is applied in different contexts. And also, as always, you can find a link to the tabs in the description below. And the tab, I've actually taken the time to write out each of these variations in full, so you won't miss how this is all put together. So do check that out if you feel the least bit insecure. So let's start with the first one, the legato loop. So it sounds like this. It's just a 6-note pattern starting on the 8th fret, then we go 8, 5, 7, 8, 7, 5. And we go through the same steps. We number the notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 notes. Then we start on 1 already. So I start on that and end on that for the first variation. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. Now done with that, we start on the 2nd note. Now with legato, ideally, you start the way that you would play it when you come around the 2nd time for the loop, meaning you should start this with a pull-off. And the way to do that is to simply prepare the pinky here on the 8th fret, and then you pull it off to start everything. So I'm actually starting on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. Right, so again. So that's the loop from the 2nd note. Then we start on the third note. Again, you want to start with whatever you would start with normally, and that would be a hammer-on here. So a hammer-on from nowhere, basically. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. That's the loop. The fourth loop, starting on the fourth note. So 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you have the fifth loop. That's going to start with a pull-off. So that's going to be 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then finally the sixth variation is going to start with a pull-off again. So 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the loops for this pattern. It's important, I feel, to play the notes exactly as they would appear in the actual loop. If you're doing more reps, let's say you're actually doing like 10 reps per loop, it's fine to just start with a pick note, because once you get one rep into the loop, however you're gonna play that note in the loop, you're already playing it that way. So it's not a big deal, but I still think it's a good thing to be able to do it this way. Right, example 2 here, it's a sweep picking phrase. And it's just a D major triad with the 5th on the top. So we're gonna go 17, 14 on the high E string, 15 on B, and then 14 on G as well. Like I said, you have the tablature and everything available, so you can check that out. Now with sweep picking, it's very important that you stick to the exact picking, because that's the whole point behind sweep picking. And also where you put legato, it should be legato there as well. We start here with an upstroke, pull off, up, down, down, down. And it's a 6-note sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. So that's the first one. Then the second note will start with a pull off. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. Next one is 3 upstroke. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. Then we start on the fourth note, the downstroke. 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have the fifth one, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the final one, 6, downstroke again, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hopefully you understand why it's so important to keep the picking intact and the legato and everything when it comes to any type of sweep picking. So the third example is alternate picking. It's just this descending phrase. Descending sixes. So we start on 17 and go 17, 16, 14 on the E string, and then the same on the B string. So this one, you have some options. So whenever you have something that's pure alternate picking, you can either decide to simply start on whatever pick stroke that the original phrase has. So in this case, we would stick to down on 1, up on 2, down on 3, up on 4, down on 5, up on 6. So you can basically follow that picking pattern, or you could simply start everything with a downstroke. So you go and so on, and basically turn the picking around on every variation, because you start with a downstroke, so you get down, up, down here. But if you start this one with a downstroke, you turn the picking around, so you get down, up, and then down. And then you can do the same thing, but starting with an upstroke, so you go up on everything. So and when I say up on everything, I mean up on each starting note, and then you alternate. So doing it in the first way, where you actually maintain the picking patterns, that's fine. But I think you will gain even more technique benefits from doing number 2 or 3. So whether you start on all downstrokes or all upstrokes, when it comes to alternate picking, working on a phrase that way is going to be really helpful, because then whenever that phrase pops up in any solo or whatever, you're going to be able to do it starting on a downstroke, starting on an upstroke, and it doesn't really matter where in the phrase you are, because you've already experienced all the different sounds and feels of this phrase. So I highly suggest that you start on one pick stroke here. This method works best on shorter to moderate length loopable patterns. And the reason for that is that however many notes you have in a loop, that's how many variations you're going to get. So once you get over, let's say 12 notes in a loop, it gets quite impractical. But I'm going to leave that up to you to try and see what you think. But also this is where the accents practice method I talked about in the previous video works so well. So it's kind of the other side of the coin here, because you still get that spotlight effect with the accents method and also with this method. So when you can't use this method, use the accents instead, and vice versa. But I think this one is pretty unbeatable when it comes to shorter, repeatable patterns, because it really bulletproofs your technique. Like the accents practice, the idea is not to get all the variations up to the same tempo. Some of them will most likely always be easier to play. Your job is simply to get all the variations up to a moderate tempo, so you won't crash and burn when you encounter it in a solo or an improvisation. So the way that I usually apply this to my own practice is to take a pattern I want to work on, and then I combine this with the chromatic practice approach. So that means that I will do less reps per loop in each position, but overall I'll probably do more reps than if I would just stay in one position and then be done with it. So I find this is a really good way to do it. So let's say you decide to do 2 reps per loop, and we apply that to the descending sixes here. So it would be like this. I start at the first position. So, and make sure that you stop on the note you started on as well. So you always want to complete the loop. Start on the second note, and I'm going to start with a downstroke again. So I'm going to get the benefit of shifting the picking around when you do alternate picking. So second note, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Move up a fret, and so on. And then you go all the way up and all the way back. So that's how I do it when I apply it to my own practice most of the time. But it's also fine to just stay in one position and maybe use a timer. So if you have a 6-note loop, you do 1 minute per variation and then a 6-minute exercise. That also works really well. What I want you to do specifically is to try this on the 3 examples provided. And once you get the hang of it and you understand everything, you look at the tabs, and you can see all the variations and you know exactly what you're doing, then try to apply this to something that you're already practicing. And then maybe use my method here of taking a smaller loop and then doing 2, 3, 4 reps per loop and move it up a half step and do that up and down the fretboard. Again, as with all of these practice methods we've covered so far, there's no magic fix here. You still need to put in the work. But I just believe that when you put in the work using better methods, you'll get better results. So give this a try for at least a week, and if you have any issues or problems or questions, just post them below in the comments. But I'm also really interested to hear, those of you who actually did this, what your experience was and if you feel that it helped you. So hope you like this one, and see you in the next one.